This is Critical Issues, Alternative Views. Thank you for joining with us again. I'm Ron Kramer, Professor of Sociology at Western Michigan University, and I usually serve as the host of our program. With me today are our two regular commentators, viewmeisters. On my right is Regena Nelson. Regena is a professor in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Educational Studies at Western Michigan University in the College of Education and Human Development.
Whoa.
You have to really say a lot of words to describe your title and where you work. And of course, Don Cooney, who's also a professor at Western in the School of Social Work. And Don is a longtime member of the Kalamazoo City Commission. And it's great to be with you. We have sort of dedicated our programs this summer to focusing on the 2024 election. And this is third or fourth program in a row, I think, we've focused on the election. And of course, this is a tremendously important election, and there have been lots of things happening, especially with Joe Biden dropping out and Kamala Harris coming on. And of course, the Democratic Party just held their convention a week or so ago in Chicago, and we want to talk about that. But I thought it might be important to sort of step back and just explain why we think it's so important to talk about this election. I think, this is a program about critical issues, and I think this may be the most critical issue of all time. This election, I think, is just so important. It's not just an election about policy, although that's important, but it's basically an election about the direction our country is going to take. It's an election about whether we're going to continue to be a democracy or whether we're going to slide into authoritarianism and fascism, perhaps a dictatorship. I mean, I really think it's that important. I mean, people might downplay that, but I think the threat that Trump poses is so grave to American democracy that we really have to ensure that he does not get elected, put back into the White House. Article that I came across the other day from New York University professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is a renowned scholar on fascism and the far right. And she had this to say. She said, "This is a referendum on what kind of political system we want for America. Will it be a democracy or will it be an autocracy? Trump and MAGA are all too clear about the model of leadership they want to impose on the country." So she points out that it's not just about policy, right? This is not just an election about policy. This is an election about the direction our country is going to go. And I think that's really important and true. And I mean, if we just step back again a little bit more and reflect on what happened on January 6, 2021, this guy tried to overthrow the United States government. He was an insurrectionist. He tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. That should be totally disqualifying for him. He should never, ever be allowed to even run again after that act of treason. And yet, here he is with perhaps too close of a chance to assume the presidency again. But again, that should have disqualified him. And I really am, now I'm sort of angry at the Biden Justice Department for dragging their feet so long to getting the trials underway. And of course, there are the federal indictments right now related to January 6th, but there's not going to be a trial. And of course, the Supreme Court put their thumb on the scale and made it almost impossible for Jack Smith to bring Trump to trial on charges related to January 6th. And so when we haven't had a chance to litigate that in the legal setting where it should have been litigated years ago, at least 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so Trump still is available to campaign and try to resume the presidency. So those are the stakes. Now, again, policies matter, and there are certainly lots of policy differences. For me, the climate change issue is the huge issue because, those of us who work on the climate issue are just so deathly afraid of Trump because he's just, drill, more refineries, and of course doing exactly the opposite of what we need to do to reduce carbon emissions and to help to deal with the issue of climate change. Not that, I mean, the Biden administration has been the best administration so far on dealing with the issue, but even they aren't doing all the things that they need to do. And so even if Kamala Harris gets elected, the climate movement is still going to have to put a lot of pressure on her administration to do more than what they've done. But we know that Trump will do nothing. And in fact, he'll do things in complete opposition to dealing with the climate crisis. And so 4 more years of a Donald Trump administration, environmental policy will be completely destroyed in this country, and the climate crisis will grow even worse. And it may be too late at that point to even do something, because the international community is going to just react with disgust to this guy and what he's trying to do on the climate issue. So, and unless the United States is a major force and the leading actor, the climate won't be addressed. So anyway, enough of my pontificating.
Big. No, you're right.
I just thought it was important to sort of lay out why we think this is so important, that this is the most critical election in our history, the most critical issue that we could probably ever talk about on a program like this. All right. Want to talk about the Democratic Convention?
Yes.
It was, so again, the last time we met, we talked about Biden withdrawing and Kamala Harris coming in, and then that was all lead up to the convention. And who was she going to pick as her vice presidential candidate?
That's right.
How was the convention going to go? I'll have to confess, I did pick Tim Walz.
You did.
I did say she was going to pick Tim Walz. So I was right. One of the few times I guess I've been right in one of my predictions. But
and that was a long shot.
He was a long shot at that time. But I just had a sense that everything I was reading, that they were moving in that direction, that the Harris people were moving in that direction, that he was really going to turn out to be the best candidate. So, well, let's talk about Tim Walz first of all then. So what do you think he brings to the ticket?
Oh, wow. So, yeah, congratulations on seeing that. He was going to be the one. And as I learned more, because I didn't know a lot about him at the time. But that what he's done, and so my field is education, particularly early childhood education and pro-family, and what he's done in Minnesota, his track record around those policies, paid family leave, more expanding tax credits for childcare, so families are well supported, and just his understanding of larger issues about what it is as a day-to-day person. So you hear that this is like Joe average guy who's lived this life that most of us have lived, and he's going to bring that perspective to the White House, hopefully. Is really important. He was an educator. He was a coach. So exactly. And so a lot of people just identify with him and his values and what he brings. So yes, very exciting to learn more about him. And we did a lot through the convention too. We got more snippets into his family life and all of that, and things have been going well. I mean, there's some things that the press will do some fact checking on him, and he's handling that as anybody who's in the public eye has to handle. They start picking apart your life, but overall, very positive.
Yeah, and 24 years of service in the National Guard.
Exactly.
That's also on his resume, in addition to being a coach and a teacher and all that. Don, what's your take on Tim Walz?
He resonates with ordinary people, that he's lived a life of middle-class people. As you said, he taught in a high school and he was a coach. So he understands what ordinary people are going through. And his record as governor, the positive things he's done, he's been active in gun control, making sure that kids got enough to eat at schools. All those kind of things are so important. His son, who has special needs, that was such a touching moment at the thing. But the very fact that he has that kind of experience, he can identify with people who are going through those kinds of things. And he speaks like you can understand him, and authenticity resonates with him. And he's easy to talk to, friendly, in contrast with the vice presidential choice of the other side, who is constantly attacking, calling people names. Yesterday telling Kamala Harris could go to hell. I mean, there's no class there at all. Whereas this guy resonates decency, and I'm really impressed with him. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I heard an interesting fact that he doesn't have any money in the stock market. Like, that's just hard to believe. He has a teacher's pension. That's his retirement. Not, I mean, it's just how he lives his values.
Yeah.
Midwestern dad.
Yeah, right.
Competent, common sense Midwestern dad who was a teacher, a coach,
Right.
Yeah.
was a great father.
Right.
And again, he and his wife had to use some kind of fertility treatment
Right.
to have
Exactly.
have those kids. And yeah, that scene with his son Gus.
Oh, gee,
at the
that was
convention
moving.
Was just
Yeah.
very moving.
Right.
Yeah.
And he handled the whole thing so well, the way he related to his family, the way he related to other people. And the other thing that I noticed, and last night it really struck me too, how he defers to Kamala Harris. He really doesn't want the spotlight, put it on her, look over there. I think that's very telling. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. I mean, given the misogyny that we see and the sexism that we see from the other candidates of the other party.
Yes.
And it's a continual stream of misogynistic and sexist comments on their part.
Absolutely.
Which is incredible that in 2024 we still have candidates for major political office who speak in such a manner about women.
Yes. Yes.
And here's Tim Walz, who can check off all the boxes on the masculine list, right? Coach, military record, right?
Hunter.
And yet his way of speaking and interacting with women is like light years different, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to show that here's a man who has all these features that we think are related to masculinity in our society, and yet he is able to act in this way with women and show that it's possible to do that.
Yes.
And I think that's really instructive for a lot of men to see that.
Absolutely. And I think when he's interviewed, the way he approaches the interview, the person that's interviewing him, teaches him with respect, doesn't try to go beyond his evidence. It's just a good feeling. You feel okay, whereas you feel attacked when you look at the other side.
Well, and you are being attacked.
You are attacked.
J.D. Vance can't start an event without attacking the media.
Right.
Those guys in the back of the room, they're horrible, they're terrible, they're
terrible.
And just the hostility. He wreaks hostility in every event that he has, and insincerity.
Yes.
And he's not very authentic. I mean, that scene of him in the donut shop was like, whoa, what a cringy moment, right? This guy, just no social skills, no social graces whatsoever. It appears, and yet he's a vice presidential candidate.
Right.
And compared to Walz, who just oozes the
He likes people. You could tell he relates well to people. He likes people. He tries to understand that person that's standing there and get to know them and be easy to talk to. Whereas the other guy, man, you better have your guard up.
And Walz has a sense of humor.
We
probably shouldn't trust anybody in public office who doesn't have a decent sense of humor.
Right. Yeah.
And the other party seems rather humorless most of the time. So the convention, it was tricky, right? Because it was transition. Joe Biden had stepped down, Kamala Harris was stepping forward. You had to have Joe Biden play a prominent role at the convention, but it couldn't overwhelm the emergence and the presentation of Kamala Harris's campaign. How do you think the Democrats handled that? How do you think that went?
Yes, so he spoke on the first night. and that, you know, it was an appropriate place for him to, at the beginning, to have that transition moment, which was very touching. You know, the introduction by his daughter, and then for him to actually also share that how this happened. Like, you know, it's not because we were all divided on this, but this was the right thing to do for my country. And that's what, and then also just to highlight what he's accomplished so far. So I think we all felt that he was given his due and was handled very properly and respectfully. Yeah.
And I thought that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, really treated him with grace and utmost respect. She did that again last night. She just looked at all the real accomplishments of his presidency and had nothing negative to say, all positive, and how he will be remembered in history. Yeah, a lot of grace, a lot of respect, a lot of kindness.
And I thought Biden's speech was maybe one of his best. It was a fiery defense of his administration and his accomplishments, and he has many accomplishments that he could rightly point to. And yet at the same time, it was also, there was a sense of, you know, this was a swan song, right? He's departing the stage, right? He's leaving the scene. He did that in a way in which, you know, this was obviously a sacrifice on his part, but it was a sacrifice he was willing to make because he was putting a greater good in front of his own personal interests. He was putting the interests of the country ahead of his own vanity and his own personal ambition. And I thought that came across in the speech.
Yes.
I thought it was one of his better speeches.
Yeah, right.
But the best speeches of the night went to...
So,
not of that night, but of the convention.
I know. So you have the Obamas down here to talk about that.
What a powerhouse team that was.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, I'm like, what can he say after Michelle Obama finishes telling us how important these issues are, what kind of person Kamala is, how she knows her, and what we can expect from her, and how it's important to have someone like that in the White House. And that she is feeling a shift. And so her quote, right, there are a couple from that night. The one is that hope is making a comeback. And it was, like, you could feel it.
Right.
You could just see there's a change. We're excited again. We see something we want to vote for, not against. So that's exciting. And I think she explained that very well. But they also cautioned us, like, this is a lot of excitement and rah-rah right now. We're high, but we have to work. We have to roll up our sleeves and do something. And that has to be the message that people take away from this convention.
I think that "do something" quote from her speech is so great and so apt, right? Do something,
exactly.
Yes, we're feeling the excitement. We've made the major move here, but you have to do something to bring this forward, right?
Both of them inspiring. And you know, when they finished, you just thought, wow, decency here, and make us proud, and give us some kind of hope again that this country can live up to what its ideals are. I thought that was great. I thought Governor Shapiro's speech was very impressive. He's quite an impressive person, but he's strong. He was clear on his ideas, put them out there. I was very impressed with him. He was good.
And of course, he was a major contender
to
be the vice presidential nomination. And I could certainly understand why so many people were touting him and suggesting he be the VP nominee. But and the fact that he didn't get selected as a vice presidential candidate, but he's still there. Strong.
That was very
Pennsylvania is so important.
Oh yeah.
And he's the one that can carry Pennsylvania forward for the Harris-Welch ticket. And I thought he gave a very strong convention speech as well.
And our governor didn't do so bad either. She did very well up there.
That was so funny when she's in Detroit. They call me Big Gretch. But and you can certainly see. I read something a day or so after her speech that you can definitely see she's presidential timber.
Oh,
you bet.
So
she did a really great job also. I thought that one of the best speeches at the convention was the one given by Adam Kinzinger.
I was going to say that. I thought that was very powerful.
And of course, it was important because he's a Republican.
Absolutely.
He's still a Republican. Right. He doesn't call himself a former Republican.
Yes.
He's still a Republican. But he's basically said, you know, my party has turned into a cult of personality. It has gone off the rails. It's no longer representing the conservative values that I believe in. And I can't support Donald Trump. I have to oppose him, and I'm giving my support to Kamala Harris. I know we will have policy differences, but I'm putting my country before my party, and I'm supporting this candidate because the other candidate, again, poses such a huge threat to American democracy. Right. And I thought he was so clear in that, and it was so important to have a Republican stand up there and say those things. Right. And you just hope we're the Republicans watching who were thinking about still voting for Trump, but listening to Adam Kinzinger now say, well, I think Kinzinger's right. I think my party is going off the rails here, and I can't support this candidate for my party. I have to support the Democratic candidate this time. And maybe for the first time ever, right?
Yeah, so. And the thing that impressed me very much was he didn't say, and I'm leaving the Republican Party. He said, no, I'm going to fight to get the Republican Party back on track. But this is consequential. I have to stand here because this man is against all the values that we have, that we hold, that real conservatives hold. I thought back to the conservative senators in the 1960s that were really standing up for principle, like Hugh Scott of Pennsylvania, Jacob Javits of New York, and other people like that stood for principles. And he was calling back to his party to get back to that kind of a situation. Yes. So he was very impressive to me. I liked him.
Yeah, when we were young, there were plenty of Republicans that we could respect and honor. Mark Hatfield,
that's right,
from Oregon, was just a stalwart. And at that time, it was like there were many Republicans who we agreed with. I think on a lot of issues. Hatfield opposing the war in Vietnam. Joining together with Democrat George McGovern to sponsor an amendment to cut off funds for the war. And there were many strong Republican senators and congressmen at that time. And you just can't say the same thing today. I mean, you look over there and, one of the things I can't understand is how so many Republicans in the Congress can humiliate themselves by supporting Donald Trump. And that's what they do. They bend down and kiss the ring. They bend the knee. They subject themselves to his insults and they just humiliate themselves to ingratiate themselves with this guy who utters the lies, this misogynistic, racist, lying candidate, and yet they're going to support that. I mean, I think they're surrendering all of their dignity in doing that, and I just can't understand why. And again, there are many people who were stalwart Republicans who, maybe I disagree with them on most things, but I didn't see them as these sort of humiliating clowns that they've become because of this guy.
Right.
Is it so important to keep the MAGA base? Do they really think that, and maybe they fear violence if some of them have said, I have to support Trump because I don't want my family subjected to threats of violence. Well, that's a horrible situation.
Oh my goodness,
right?
What a country.
But yes, I just can't. So I think it was very important. And not only that, I don't know if you noticed last week, there were over 200 Republicans who had worked in the Trump administration. And they came out with a statement that they could not support him for election this time. Over 200 people who actually worked for the man when he was in office. And they said, no, what we saw, what we were subjected to, what we see him planning to do, we cannot support this man. 200 Republicans, former staffers of the Trump administration, came out strong against him. And of course, even Bill Kristol, arch conservative. With I can't remember the name of the magazine right now, but nonetheless.
Current? Is it Current?
I can't remember right now, but nonetheless, Kristol, pretty respected figure on the right.
Yeah.
He's also, you know, sounding the alarm about Trump and saying we
Yeah.
can't support him.
Yeah.
He's leading a group called Republicans for Harris as
Okay.
well. And
Good.
so, you know, and again, I think we need more and more. We need people, prominent Republicans, who see the danger, stepping up and issuing the challenge. And that's what Kinzinger did at the convention, and I thought he did it so well.
Yeah. Despite all this, he's getting big crowds. Trump continues to get big crowds, and Vance continues to get big crowds. All the things that we've been saying seem so obvious to us.
Right.
But there's still a lot of people out there who say, I'm listening to this guy, I'm going to follow him. So it's going to be a struggle right down to the wire.
Right.
It's going to be a struggle.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're only hearing one side of the story and you put blinders on for anything else, of course you're going to stay and
Yeah.
support him because
Yeah.
you're not seeking for alternative evidence.
That's right.
To think otherwise.
That's
and so we
right.
have a lot of people in our country who operate that way, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, it is frightening. Yeah.
So there's clearly a MAGA base, a Trump base.
Yes.
Right? I mean, Trump has
Yes.
created a cult, and you know, you can't talk to or convince these cult members to change their position. It's just not going to happen.
Nope.
And so that's a pretty substantial base for him to work with, but he can't win with that base alone.
Right.
And so here's
That's
where, you know, so there have to be other Republicans who are not part of the cult who have to be dissuaded from voting for him.
Right.
There have to be independents who swing voters, right, who don't identify with either political party, go with the person, not the party. When they vote, the majority of those independents have to be brought over. People who normally don't participate in the political process have to be
Right.
brought into the process this time and have to be registered and then encouraged to actually vote. And so those are the things that I see happening with the Harris campaign.
Right.
You know, I think she has the ability to attract the Adam Kinzingers and
Yeah.
those disaffected Republicans. She seems to be pulling more and more and more of the independents in her direction. She seems to be have excited a surge of new voters to come into the system and to hopefully vote in November. And on top of that, I think she's also reinvigorated her base,
Right.
the Democratic base, which was, let's be honest, the Democratic base before Joe Biden stepped down was discouraged, depressed, not motivated, not working for the campaign, sort of resigning themselves to the Trump autocracy that they see coming. And they had their heads down and were just shuffling along in deep despair. And then Biden steps down, Harris steps in, Tim Walz gets, and boom, there's now a new wave of enthusiasm and hope. That's what Michelle Obama was talking about. Hope is back.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden now the Democratic base is re-energized.
Right.
And so is the Democratic base, which I think is larger than the MAGA base to begin with, is that re-energized enough to overcome the cult of Donald Trump? And then on top of that, the independents and the new voters and the disaffected Republicans. Is that enough to carry the day? And that's the question I think that we have to see unfold here.
I think one of the things that is helping with that is the positive nature of the campaign. I mean, she comes out smiling, laughing, making people laugh, and talking about the future.
Right.
Trump keeps talking about we're going back, we're going back. She's talking about the future. We can do better. We can be the country that we were destined to be. We got to move in that direction. And that's all positive kinds of things. And I think people are getting tired of the negative stuff.
Right.
And I don't think people like that all the time. When you tear down other people, you say how terrible everything is. Somebody's saying to you, this can be better, and we're going to make it better. that's a really positive message, and I think it's resonating.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yes, people like her for sure.
Yes.
But is that enough if you are undecided to vote for her? That's where now they're like, okay,
Right.
she has my attention. I'm listening for these policies because that is going to make a difference for me. And I need that. I need to hear that before I can say 100% I'm for her.
Right.
So yeah, so that's going to be important as well.
I think the economic inequality issue is huge. And people want to know, what are you going to do different
Yep.
that's going to help me
Exactly.
be able to take care of my family?
Right.
Because I'm not being able to do it now.
Right.
And I think she's got to really work on that. I mean, I think some of the things that you talked about, paid family leave and the child tax credit, what she's talking about with housing,
Right.
they're all really good steps in the right direction. And she's got to try to put that together into a coherent plan.
Exactly.
Emphasize, whereas the Trump plan is essentially a trickle-down plan. We're going to give these guys cuts. They're going to, the same old story.
Right.
Whereas what she's talking about is investing in middle class, ordinary people, and people that are in struggle. I think that's exactly the things that could sway people
Right.
and get them in the line.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yes, these policies are really important, and that's going to be part of the key to convincing people. But there's also something to be said for just the vibe.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we've been talking about the vibe, the
Yeah,
enthusiasm.
yeah, right.
You know, I think the Harris campaign perhaps is looking back in history and taking a page from the Ronald Reagan campaign of 1984, the Morning in America campaign.
Yeah,
And that was very successful.
it was.
You know, Reagan was an incumbent president. He wasn't particularly popular in his first term. There were plenty of problems and issues in his first term. But they ran a really, really great campaign in 1984
They did.
against Walter Mondale. The Morning in America campaign, the positivity, the vibe, and the folksiness of Ronald Reagan,
Yep.
the cheerfulness of Ronald Reagan. You know, despite the fact that people might not have liked his policies, it was like, oh yeah, he's kind of a folksy old grandpa kind of guy. And again, Morning in America, we're coming back. And again, it was a vibe. It
Right.
wasn't
Absolutely.
based on policies.
No.
It was based on a vibe, a sense of enthusiasm. And,
Yeah.
you know, what happened to Mondale? He got slaughtered in the Electoral College.
Yeah, the policies weren't very good at all, but the vibe was really encouraging. He was talking about Morning America and things going to get better, which they got worse. But I mean, that's what carried him. People saw a positive vision. People saw a chance that things could get better.
Right.
And she's holding that out. So it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem is, the biggest problem, and this is something that as a nation we will have to confront at some point, is the Electoral College.
Oh,
The Electoral College is an anachronism. It's undemocratic. It's just plain stupid that the person that gets the most votes doesn't win the election.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Or that it's possible that the person that gets the most votes doesn't win.
Yeah.
Where else
Well,
in
we've had that, yeah.
in the democratic world is it where the person who gets the most votes doesn't win? And yet that has happened several times. That's how Trump got into office in
Yes,
the first
exactly.
place in 2016. George W. Bush did the same
Right.
thing in 2000. It's possible for somebody who doesn't get the most votes to become president. That's just not right.
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 That's just unfair.
Exactly. It's not democratic.
That's not democratic. That has to change. But that's the reality that we face.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why this election would not be close at all if it were not for the Electoral College.
Right.
This would be a blowout. This would be a complete blowout for Kamala Harris if it were not for the Electoral College. She's going to win the popular vote by millions and millions and millions over Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But she still might not win the
right.
election.
That's right.
Right? And so that's the ugly reality that we have to face here, is that, okay, it really matters now. And so that brings it down to just the number of states, right, that really
Yeah.
are in contention and have the battleground states, as they're called. We're
Right.
one of those states.
Yeah.
Right? Wisconsin is, Pennsylvania, I mean, those three are often referred to as the blue wall, right? You know, have records of voting Democratic,
Yeah.
but are purple. They're not blue.
Right,
They're not
right.
red. They're purple.
Right.
Now you throw into the mix a state like Georgia,
Yep.
Right.
which has emerged as a purple state. Arizona, which has emerged as a purple state. Nevada, which has emerged as a purple state. North Carolina
Yeah.
is becoming more purple now. And so all of a sudden, you know, that's where the attention has to go, right? That's where the candidates always go. Michigan,
Right.
Wisconsin,
Right.
Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona. The rest of the country
Right.
is, you know, in a sense, doesn't matter because what does it matter? You know, California and New York are going to go Democratic, and
Yeah.
the middle of the country is going to go for Trump. So it comes down to this. So again, the Electoral College is something that needs to be changed, and I hope that there's a strong campaign to change it after this election. But for the moment, obviously,
This is where we are. We
That's
gotta
where
deal
we
with
are.
it. Yeah.
That's what we have to face.
I think the other thing is the efforts to make it difficult for people to vote and to manipulate. Now, that the new law that was just passed in Georgia, they've gotten their people elected to the electoral boards in these different states, and specifically in Georgia. And Georgia just passed a law that says that the results will not be ratified until any rational question about the election is closed. There's a conflict there because there's also a law in Georgia that says they must turn in their electoral votes by a certain date. But if these people continue to question and it goes beyond that date, and the electoral votes from Georgia are not counted, that could have a tremendous effect on the outcome of the election. So they're trying to manipulate. They try to do this, and that's
The
tough.
Republicans have two strategies here. One is voter suppression.
Yep.
Keep people from having the ability to vote,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Especially keep African Americans from having the ability to vote.
Yes.
Keep poor people from having the ability to vote. Latinos from having, and in Texas, did you notice last week that the Attorney General, the MAGA Attorney General in Texas, raided several Latino organizations that work on voter registration. Pure political intimidation. That's all it is. There's no basis at all.
No.
There's no probable cause at all for the Attorney General to do this. This is pure bare-knuckled political intimidation to try to keep these Latino groups from registering voters because they know they won't vote for them, right? And so there are all kinds of voter suppression efforts that have been ongoing. Well, it's not just during the Trump years, but even before that.
Yeah.
And of course, the Supreme Court, with their decision, allowed for this to happen, allowed for this regression and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Taking away the supervision of
Yes.
these states.
Yes. So voter suppression is very active. That's happening. The enthusiasm on the part of the Harris campaign, registering new voters, getting young people involved, motivating the African American voters, motivating the Latino voters, hopefully that's going to be enough to overcome. But there clearly is efforts to keep those people from voting, right? And then, but the second thing then is that, okay, if we can't keep them from voting, we have to cheat.
Yeah,
Right.
That's all it is.
Right.
It's
Right,
cheating.
right, right.
That's what the Georgia people just set up, a way to cheat, a way to not certify what the people of Georgia just said they wanted to do.
Yes.
You know, okay, people in Georgia voted to elect Kamala Harris, but we're not going to allow that to happen
we have
because we're
some
going to gum up.
questions. We have some
We're going to screw up the
questions. Yeah.
certification process
Yeah.
here. We're going to delay it, and we're going to hopefully create a situation where Georgia's electoral votes won't get counted. That's what they're doing.
Exactly.
That's exactly
Precisely.
what they're doing.
And
So
that's their
suppress
goal.
and cheat. Those are the two plans. and Trump almost seems to be at sometimes, you know, his campaign is a strange thing. I mean, you know, I know this guy is, you know, I know he's not smart at times about politics. I know he's ignorant about a lot of things about politics. But it almost seems that sometimes that he's not really doing the things that he needs to do to win over voters.
No.
And it seems to be that he's already sort of conceding the idea that, well, we're not going to get the most votes, but we've got this backup plan to come up the works, and we'll still prevail. We'll get this so screwed up that it'll be thrown to Congress, and then the Republican, each state then has to vote, and I've got enough Republican states that I can still win in that fashion. And that seems to be the plan almost on the part. I mean, they almost seem to go out of their way at times to insult key constituencies that they need, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and again, I think some political scientists must be pulling their hair out watching this campaign as it unfolds, because, again, the open misogyny, the open sexism, the open racism that sometimes spews forth from Trump in his tweets or whatever they are, his social media postings and his speeches, his rambling, incoherent, I don't even dignify them by calling them speeches. When he goes to a rally, it just sort of gets up there. They try to keep him on track, right? Try to keep him, read from the teleprompter, stay on script, talk policy. And he does it for like 5 minutes, and then boom, then he's off, and he's rambling, and he's incoherent, and he's spewing forth all this vile stuff that he normally does, and telling all these monstrous lies that he tells continually.
Yeah, I mean, right after he was shot, I guess he was shot, when he first spoke at their convention, people thought, well, maybe this guy's changed. And in the beginning of his speech,
he stayed on script.
Yeah, he stayed on script, and then he went way off, and everybody said, oh.
An hour and a half later.
Right.
And that's the thing, he just goes on and on and on, and he's rambling, and people start to leave. His own MAGA people start to leave the place because there's rambling incoherence. And then, of course, the other thing about and again, campaign political ads have always been horrible. I think they should be banned. I don't think you should be allowed to have any political advertising on television, because it's almost always lie. Right. It's one lie after another. Both parties tend to do it. Okay. Now there's puffery, and there are little white lies, and there's shading the truth, and then there's what the Republicans do, which is just outright outrageous lies and disinformation.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the ads that keep running about attacking Harris on the border.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
yes.
There's hardly anything in those ads that are truthful. Right. I mean, they keep saying she was the border czar. There is no such thing.
Right.
There is no position. There is no, I mean, maybe somebody in the media said, oh, when Trump wants her to look into the historical roots of immigration and maybe think about some long-term plans to deal with that, that they used the term border czar in a media post. But Biden never called her the border czar. There is no such official position. She never called herself the border czar, but that's what they say. And then they imply that since she was the border czar, somehow she's responsible for the day-to-day operations at the border. No, that's the job of Homeland Security and the Border Patrol. Kamala Harris doesn't have anything to do with the day-to-day operations at the border. She's not responsible, even if there were a lot of unauthorized crossings. That's not her responsibility. That's not. She didn't cause that. And yet, this is the line of attack, right? And of course, this is exactly what they want to do. This is why Trump made sure that the bipartisan border bill didn't pass. I mean, one of the most conservative senators, Langford, led the effort for a bipartisan border bill. A lot of the people who study the border didn't like the bill. They thought it was too strong, too strict, too restrictive. But nonetheless, Biden was going to go along with it. Biden said he would sign it. The Democrats in the Senate agreed to the bill. It would have, but it would have taken the border off the issue, right? It couldn't have been part of the campaign if there was a bipartisan border bill that had passed. So Trump, who said, I want to run on the border, it's one of my best issues. It's one of the hammers I can use to go after the Democrats. So don't take away my hammer. Don't take away my bloody hammer, because I'm using it on the Democrats on the border. Let me keep using that. So vote this down. they voted it down.
Yeah.
Right.
Republicans who had,
Worked on it,
had agreed to it, who think it's a good bill, then they said no. And they only said no because Trump demanded. I mean, here again, it's the humiliation of these people. The abject subservience, the cultish nature of the Republican Party of these days.
Right.
So they said, no, we're not going to vote. We're not going to. So now that issue remains alive, and Trump can still use the bloody hammer. And he sure is, right? Ad after ad after ad hammers her on the border as if she was the border czar, as if she was responsible, as if she didn't support the bill that would have fixed some of the things they are complaining about. So again, it's an artificially contrived issue for Trump to use.
Yeah.
And it's based on lies and disinformation.
Absolutely. So one thing I think that's going to be crucial is the debate, the first debate.
Yes.
That's going to be really, really important because people are going to be watching that. And she really has to do well in that. I'm confident she will. With her experience as a litigator and as a prosecutor, I mean, she should be great, but she has to be. She can't come off from there mediocre. No, she has to be strong.
Right.
Because she needs it. That's going to be big.
I agree. It's going to be interesting. I hear that they're finalizing the details and what is the final issues about, will the mics be muted when you're not speaking?
Okay.
So how that works for Trump to talk over people, change the subject, talk over the moderator to get his points across. So hopefully they'll rein him in and not let that happen. So it can be a productive and informational debate, not his show.
Right, right. Do you think there'll be more than one debate?
That's a good question. I hope.
Me too.
We haven't heard beyond this first one.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think Trump will need more than. It depends how he does in the first debate. If she murders him, he won't want any more debates. But if she doesn't, I think he's going to need that to win. So he'll want more debates. So I think it's going to be really interesting. It's coming up real quick now. Yeah. September 10th.
Well, he's clearly afraid to debate it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He tried to weasel out of it.
Right, but
he's tried several. But his own people have called him on it.
Yeah.
Said no, you can't be a coward. You can't not debate.
Right.
But he would have if he hadn't got pushback from his own people. He would have basically said, no, I'm not debating.
But he's starting to lose, and he's almost thinking he has to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So he is going to debate, and then again, I'm not sure how this mic thing works because remember when he was debating Hillary Clinton and she was trying to talk and he'd go wrong, she'd say wrong. He did that about 10 times in a row to Hillary Clinton. So disruptive. I mean, it's hard to debate a bully.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what he is. He's an obnoxious bully. How do you debate an obnoxious bully who won't shut up, who won't tell the truth, who's going to belittle you, who's going to attack you? I mean, it's really a hard situation, I think, for Kamala Harris. Now, she's a prosecutor. She's skilled in debate.
Yeah.
But debating a bully
tough.
Is tough.
Because he doesn't follow the rules. Yeah. He won't follow the rules, and that's crazy. There's another issue that we can't close without talking about, and that is Gaza.
Right.
And it's a very tough issue. What is happening in Gaza, of course, is awful, just terrible, a complete violation of any human right at all.
War crimes.
War crimes.
Maybe rising to the level of genocide.
Yes. And I would say what's happening in the West Bank now makes it even more look like it's genocide. And, she has said some decent things about this. There's a lot of people that have lost family in there that aren't going to vote for her unless she takes a stronger stand. And I'm not clear why she can at least say, we're not going to give any bombs that are going to be used in Gaza. I mean, we're doing that with Ukraine, aren't we? Aren't we saying we're giving Ukraine weapons which they can't use in Russia? I think we're doing that. Why can't we do that with them? She's not done that yet. So this is a tough question. The trouble that we face is this guy, her opponent, is going to be worse on the issue. So we can't allow him to win. But she has to take a stronger stand on this, I believe.
Yeah, I know she keeps saying that she and Biden are working tirelessly to get to a ceasefire. I don't know how this is going to play out before the election day or before people start voting. But yes, it would be nice to see some positive movement in that area. And that's her stance, trying to say, I'm doing what you asked me to do to make this stop. But at the same time, Israel has the right to protect themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Well, and here's the dilemma that progressives face all the time, right? We have two political parties in this country, and only two.
Yep.
That really matter. And both are, in a sense, larger business-related parties, corporate parties, and the Democrats have a progressive wing, right? Bernie Sanders, AOC,
Democratic
there's a progressive wing. There's always been a progressive wing in the Democratic Party. And I remember our good friend Michael Harrington, who always used to talk about the left wing of the Democratic Party, and that his position consistently was, over the years, I'm going to support the left wing of the Democratic Party. And that's our best hope to do anything humane and decent in politics in this country. And so that's the dilemma that I think progressives face, because often even the Democratic Party is not going to do the things that progressives want.
That's right.
With regard to the military budget, with regard to nuclear weapons, now, of course, with regard to the situation in Gaza. So it poses a real dilemma, because, okay, you can withhold your support of the Democratic Party, but then what does that get you?
Right.
Absolutely nothing, right? What it gets you is something even worse. Right?
Yeah.
So if the Trump and MAGA people take control of the United States federal government, all the things that progressives care about will be affected heavily, right? Seriously affected. If the Democrats, even the corporate Democrats, right, not the left wing of the Democratic Party, but the other wing of the Democratic Party gets in, then at least at that point we've got a chance.
Yeah, we do. That's it.
Because now we have a chance to try to work hard to influence that. We don't always win, and historically we've not had as much success. I mean, I think even Michael Harrington would have agreed with that assessment.
Oh yeah.
But I think, like Mike, we have to say, well, there is a progressive wing to the Democratic Party. It offers us some hope, the best hope that we have right now, given a bad political situation. It gives us a chance to have some influence. We've got to go that route.
That's exactly
because it's the only hope we have.
Yep, I agree with that. In the election in 2000, I strongly supported Ralph Nader. I worked for him. We brought him here to speak, and we fought it, and we got 3% of the vote, and we got George W. Bush. I learned a lesson from that. I learned a lesson from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people characterize it as voting for the lesser of two evils. I don't think.
No, I
don't
think
think that is an accurate description. But clearly, clearly Kamala Harris would be better for progressives to have in office, even if she's not doing all the things that we want her to do.
Because there's a lot of other issues out here, and a lot of people are going to be affected by what happens in this election in so many different ways that we've been talking about the whole time. And we have to have a perspective on that and say, listen, we got a better chance with her in the White House. In fact, we've got a pretty good chance to move things in a positive direction.
Yes,
I think so.
And control of the Supreme Court is a really incredibly important issue. We're seeing now how much that mattered, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
When Mitch McConnell was able to pull his shenanigans and stack the court, And then when Trump got in office, and so control of the Supreme Court is so vital, and that's at stake here as well. So those are, I think those are the issues. I think on the climate issue, she's also not said much.
No.
She's not, I think climate movement activists would like her to speak more about the issue and take a stronger stand, but she's downplaying it, or downplaying it, I think is the right word to say. And so it's just, she has to massage the Gaza issue, right?
Right.
Because, that's a tremendously bad issue for her and for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And the climate issue is an important issue. And of course, these are important to young people.
Oh.
Right? These are vitally important to young people.
Yeah.
And so, the movement of young people to register to vote and be active in the campaign and to actually vote in November is critically important to her campaign. So that's a really delicate, tricky balance there that she has to maneuver in.
Yeah.
All right, we have 2 minutes left. So one final thought from each of you about the election.
We have to get young people to vote. And being on a college campus, we really have to foster this and help them understand how important this is.
Yes, I agree, and I do think her campaign recognizes that.
Yeah.
I'm hearing that lots of resources will be coming to our campus, and I'm excited to see that somebody will be there every day talking about voter registration and these issues. So yes, we all have to do our part.
I completely agree with both of you on those issues. Yeah, the Climate Change Working Group is working really hard on talking about become a climate voter.
Good.
Being a climate voter means voting for Kamala Harris. It's just that plain and simple. Because Donald Trump will destroy any effort to deal with the climate crisis.
Yeah.
And so be a climate voter is voting for Harris. And it's important to have those resources out there. So, thanks again to both of you. It's been a great discussion. We'll probably continue to talk about the election. There's still many other issues out there that we haven't been able to address. But this is such an important election. To come back to the very first point we made, the most critical issue that we faced in our country's history in a really long time. So we really implore you to get out there, to do what you can with regard to this election. As Michelle Obama said, do something.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on Critical Issues.